bought some books. Here's what I got. Now, I'm doing some reading for June on the Range, all about Westerns. And I have to say, I'm really enjoying reading about Westerns. So, not all of these books, but some of them are Westerns. Some of them novels, some of them not fiction at all. But let me show you what I got. Book number 1 is Leaving Cheyenne by Larry McMurtry. I have not found Lonesome Dove yet, but I've been looking for Lonesome Dove. But I was interested to find and scoop up a couple other books by Larry McMurtry as well. I've started reading Leaving Cheyenne already, and it's been a really interesting book so far. It's really about two guys, Gideon and Johnny, and his cowboy pal, Johnny, and they both love this girl named Molly. And I think it's going to be about the adventures that they have and the decisions that are made by them. So Leaving Cheyenne is a compelling story. Book number 2 is in not nearly as good a shape as the first one was, but this is by Louis L'Amour, The Lonesome Gods. It's actually, compared to a lot of his books that are rather short, this one is much longer. I think it's about 450 pages. I've started this one as well. Really enjoying reading this book about Johannes Verne, young man left to die by his vengeful grandfather, rescued by outlaws and raised in part by Indians of the desert. And so, of course, there's obviously his love of two women in this. So really looking forward to reading this. Started it as well, and I'm really liking the beginning of The Lonesome Gods by Louis L'Amour. Book number 3, I bought Devil Wire by Cameron Judd. I've talked about this one in another video, but it's about the challenges that come to the West when the barbed wire fence, as you can see there in the video, shows up, and the fighting and that ensues when all the land starts getting divided up by that devil wire, the barbed wire fences. So looking forward. I've not started this one yet, but hoping to get to it here in the month of June. Book number 4, this is another one I've not started yet, but hope to get to it here in June on the Range, is The Border Empire by Ralph Compton. A writer, at least the Huntsville Times says, in the tradition of Louis L'Amour and Zane Grey. The Border Empire is about a man whose father is a famous gunfighter who has been killed, and now he is going after the individuals, the outlaws, the outlaw army, in fact, who killed his father. So looking forward to hopefully getting to this one as well, The Border Empire by Ralph Compton. Here's a classic I picked up. Didn't have a copy of this, but I've heard a lot about it, and I've read, I guess I have seen bits and pieces of the book in various places, but The Art of War by Sun Tzu. And really, kind of this is more, I guess, a book where you pick it up and read through it at various times. But it is this is a classic work. This is considered the most, as you can read there, the most prestigious and influential book of strategy in the world today, dealing with conflict. It's not just about war, but I would say, broadly speaking, it's about dealing with conflict and overcoming obstacles in your way. So I have this book on the shelf. Probably will pull it out and read through it at some point, but glad to have that one. All right, we are back in the world of Westerns. We have The Sun, a novel by Philip Meyer. I was doing some research on, because I don't know much about Westerns, and I was doing some research on, what are some of the top novels, or ones that are considered to be some of the top novels as far as Western novels go. And several of the lists I looked at had this book, had The Sun in their top 10 or in their top 5. So I found it, and I was like, well, I'm going to check it out. It's in really good shape. Started reading it. Really interesting. It's following the story of a family, and it jumps back and forth between different generations. So hoping it's not too confusing to read. It hasn't been so far, but I've really enjoyed it. It's been a good story so far. So we'll see how The Sun by Philip Meyer turns out. Now this, of all the books I picked up, I guess this is one of the ones that is not a work of fiction. And this is actually a one that I've not been able to put down, as you can see by my marked page there. I've already read about 70 or 80 pages in this book. But The Mammoth Book of Native Americans, the story of America's original inhabitants in all its beauty, magic, truth, and tragedy, edited by John E. Lewis. This is a book that really tries to go back as far as possible in looking into the life and the history and the culture of the Native Americans all over the United States. And I guess all over North America, really, is what it's talking about. But we're not really into all the conflict. Where I'm in reading right now is probably the 1600s. But it really is a book of history. And I don't know much about the history behind the Native American people. And so I'm really enjoying this book. It's really helping to ground my, I guess, the reading of Westerns, which is all fiction. This is kind of providing the fact and the actual history to kind of ground my reading of Westerns. So really enjoying this book so far. Now, this one's been interesting. I've read a chapter or two in this one, The Fiction Class by Susan Breen. It's basically walking you through this lady who teaches a fiction class to students. And throughout the book, it actually, at the end of each chapter, it gives you some assignments if you are wanting to write fiction. It's like, hey, try this little, this little assignment, write down these things and then write a paragraph about each one, that kind of a thing. But it's a novel, so it's really interesting. It's a really interesting approach to teaching writing. I do write quite a bit, and I'm wanting to learn more and get better at writing fiction. So picked up this book as well as another one we're going to get to in a moment. But The Fiction Class by Susan Breen. All right, when I saw this one, I just couldn't pass it up. Marley and Me by John Grogan. I've never read the book. I remember it's been years ago, but I saw the movie, and I loved it. I'm a dog person. I love dogs. And I remember loving this movie. And so I have no doubt that I'm going to love the book as well. It's in fantastic shape. In fact, I got it in part because I love this story and I love dogs, but it doesn't hardly even look like it's been used at all. So really glad to have this book on the shelf. All right, we're back to Westerns again. This is another one that when I was doing research on top Western novels, this was another one that kept coming up over and over again, Little Big Man by Thomas Berger. It's a very interesting take on a Western because it is the story of how this writer, essentially, this man, goes to this hospital to interview this very old man, supposedly 111 years old, Jack Crabb, and interviews him about his life. And he claims that he was someone who, for example, was at the Battle of Little Bighorn there with George Armstrong Custer. Custer stands, the Battle of Little Bighorn. So very interesting. It's a fictional book about a man interviewing another man about his life. And so that's a really interesting take. And I've started this book, and it has been interesting so far. But Little Big Man by Thomas Berger, glad to have come across this one. All right, here's another book about writing, Why I Write, Thoughts on the Craft of Fiction, editor Will Blythe. As you can see, each chapter basically is written by a whole list of people. But it's about writing, but it's about, and Will Blythe, I read the introduction to this book already. He said it's about really not so much how to write as why do you write? And I enjoy reading about the why behind things. And so I'm really looking forward to digging into this book and reading these different essays by these various fiction writers on why they write and their different approaches. So a really good one, and I'm glad I've got this one on my shelf. I've got quite a few books about writing. This is another one I can add to that collection. And then finally, this is just a plain cover, but we have come full circle. We're back to Westerns, and we're back to Larry McMurtry. Have The Streets of Laredo by Larry McMurtry. I picked this one up. My local library has several shelves of books that they sell, just kind of used books that they're looking to get rid of to, I guess, make room, maybe to build up some money for the library. And this was one of the ones I noticed they were selling. So I have a couple books by Larry McMurtry now. Still no Lonesome Dove. I'm looking to add that to the collection. I would really like to read that one. But I've got a couple others by Larry McMurtry. So glad to have found The Streets of Laredo by Larry McMurtry. So there you go. that's my book haul. Over the last week or so, I've been going to a few different places around town and collecting those books slowly, 1, 2, 3 at a time. But really glad with what I got. None of those books were really all that expensive. In fact, I think the most expensive of those books were, a couple of them were maybe $8. But everything else, for the most part, some of them were less than $1, some of them were $1. So did not overpay at all for that stack of books. So really glad for that. Hope to have another book haul at some point. If you like this kind of video, which I think BookTube seems to like this kind of video, hope you give it a like, subscribe. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books, and if you have, which one was your favorite. That may help me to figure out which one to start reading next. So appreciate you doing that. Y'all take care.